Hey, this is Julio.
Hey, this is Steve.
Before the podcast starts, we want to welcome and give you the opportunity to support our ministry by visiting our website at www.bridgemanlaredo.org. Scroll down to the bottom of any page and you'll find the PayPal donate button.
Bridge Ministries exists to share the glorious good news of Jesus Christ and to equip people to be transformed by the renewing of their minds. If you would like to help us in our mission of making affordable or free Bibles and Christian books available, and also to check out the orphanage that we support, visit our website.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this is the Bridge Ministry Podcast, Coffee Colloquy, and we're back here for another one. I'm extremely excited. We have a special guest on, but before we introduce him, my name's Julio Rodriguez. I am your host, and in front of me, I have one of my good brothers in Christ, Christian Hernandez.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah. So, how's today been going, man?
Yeah, it's been going pretty good, man. I just got out of work, so glad to be here and make time, especially for this one. This is going to be a good one.
Yeah, definitely. So we are a Christian bookstore and coffee shop. Again, we're Bridge Ministry. We're located here. If you are driving in or you live in the community, you could stop by 6019 McPherson Road, Suite 8. We live in Laredo, Texas, 78041. That's our area code, just in case you want to look exactly where we're at. But you could swing by. We're open Mondays through Friday, 8 a.m. through 6 p.m., and Saturdays, 8 a.m. through 4 p.m., and you could find everything here from philosophy, biology, soteriology, Reformed perspective theology, Calvinism, Arminianism. We're sort of open to any theological discussion or topic, but most importantly, we want to preach the gospel, get you guys to know Jesus Christ, and that He is He has all authority in heaven and on earth. So, but other than that, let's go ahead and introduce our guest today. I'm super excited. Again, this is kind of going more into our apologetic tour. We had Warner Wallace on a couple of weeks back. That was awesome, right?
Yeah, that was great. We also had JP Holding on.
Yeah, we had JP Holding on, and that was cool. We're still trying to get Matt Slick, but that guy does not answer an email. He does not answer an email, and I messaged him on Facebook, and he's like, "Oh, what was your email address again?" And so we've had Eric Hernandez as well, Eli Elias, and I pretty much that's about it, right?
Yeah, that's about what we had so far.
So now we bring on another gentleman. He has a YouTube channel that has blown up, and I've just come to enjoy it so much. He creates videos, and I just got tons of questions to ask of him. But it's Inspiring Philosophy. He has a YouTube channel, Facebook page. You can find him on Patreon, and he's all about audiovisual apologetics. So I just want to introduce none other than Inspiring Philosophy, or Michael Jones. How's it going, man?
Yeah, good. How's it going? Thanks for having me on. I have no idea how my channel exploded. It just did. I never planned for this, and I don't know why it is that.
Yeah, it's had a success. I mean, I was on your website a couple of hours ago, and I was watching out how, like, the first year you just kind of set a goal of 100 followers, and then went to 700, and then now I previously looked and it was like 40,000.
Yeah, 43,000 around there.
Yeah.
Yeah. My original goal was to do like 13 videos, just common arguments I've used in debates online, just so I didn't have to constantly keep repeating myself. So I thought I would upload a video, and then I could use it in a debate, and then the videos just kind of got a little more popular, and I decided, well, I'll make a couple more, and then I just kept making more.
Yeah. So yeah, they're excellent. So why the title Inspiring Philosophy? Like why that name, I guess?
It kind of came from a couple of just things I was thinking around. Mm-hmm. First of all, it worked, and when you're typing a YouTube name in, it came, oh, good, no one's used this yet. I guess I could take that, because sometimes you start typing a name in and like, oh, this one's taken, oh, this one's taken, oh, this one's taken. Yeah. So that was one reason. The one reason is because I was so sick and tired of all of the philosophical arguments from atheist channels on YouTube, mm-hmm. and how bad they were. So I wanted to do a philosophy channel, but I wanted it to be something that was more inspiring. So I just went with that. It just kind of had a nice ring to it, so I went with it.
Yeah. It's excellent, man. I really like the name. And one thing that I wanted to ask, are you like a one-man show in creating these videos? Because man, they're like really well done, and the music is so epic too.
Yeah, they're very high quality.
So like, I guess tell us, man. Like, how do you make these videos? Or is it a team, or is it just you?
For the most part, it is just me.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I have people review my videos. Like when I did my series, my quantum mechanic videos, I contacted a couple physicists like Fred Kuttner, Bruce Rosenblum before he passed away to review them.
Nice.
Right now, I have Andrew Fisher reviewing my series on metaethics.
Okay.
He's a philosopher over in England. But other than that, the production, the writing, the research, I pretty much do by myself.
Yeah, wow, that's awesome. I did not know that. So I really appreciate that. I mean, just everything in your videos are like super scholarly, right? They're backed up by science, by facts, and then that's even cool to know too that you're actually going to scholars to review your material.
And all the sources are cited like on every channel, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I try to do that because I think that's very important. And yeah, and sometimes they'll catch pretty major errors, and I'm like, oh, geez, I don't want to put that out. Like,
okay,
yeah.
So I mean, it's good to get stuff peer reviewed because I mean, in the most common sense, because you're not going to be perfect. You should always have another pair of eyes on it.
Right. Yeah. No. That's great, man. I'm glad. And I wanted to ask this too, just because, I mean, now apologetics, you could see where the debates are being taken place. The majority of them are taken on the internet, on YouTube. You have Max Kolbe, which I know you've talked to from Escaping Atheism. Like his channel got monetized, and so he's working off his own. Have you had any of that with your channel? It being just
monetizing
shut down?
My channel?
Like
just shut down
or demonetized?
Yeah. There you go.
No, my channel's not been shut down. The worst thing that happened was I had a couple of videos where I had the sermons of Tim Keller, and I put video to them, and then the church found out about them. They didn't really like me. They didn't want me to do anymore, but they said I could keep them up. And then later, somebody else, somehow the management shifted around, and then I got like a copyright strike on my thing, and I did contact them, and they said, all right, well, we'll remove the copyright strike, but take the videos down. Okay. And I was like, oh, that's fine. It's ridiculous, but sure, I'll take them down.
Yeah.
So, but that was about it. But no, my channel has not been pulled or anything.
Okay. Cool. Well, yeah, I wanted to ask the question. I mean, there's Apologetics 315. That's a website. You got Carm with Matt Slick, Tectonic with JP
Holding.
JP Holding. I'll say JP Moreland. Biologos and stuff like what makes your channel different from all the rest of the sort of apologetic sources and sites that usually Christians would recommend?
Well, one thing, we are trying to cover everything. We want to have an apologetic answer out there for everything. JP Holding kind of sticks to just defending the Bible, going through New Testament or Old Testament criticism in regards to that. Some other channels just tend to focus on the arguments for God's existence or things like that. We're trying to cover everything. And one thing you will get on my channel, you're not going to get on a lot of other places, is newer arguments for God's existence from quantum mechanics, which not a lot of people are focusing on, which I think is kind of unfortunate, because there are some pretty powerful arguments. And I've had direct comments on my channel saying, I've not been convinced by the traditional arguments for theism, but this turned me into a deist, or this turned me into a theist just from those arguments from quantum mechanics. So I think that's one thing I focus on that you're not going to get a lot of other people. And I'm not done in that area. I still want to do some more, and I'm going to just kind of keep going in that direction, because most Christian apologists now would kind of stay away from that, and I think that's kind of unfortunate, because I think there's a lot of powerful evidence in that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I and I just want to say this to our listeners and the people in our community is go support Inspiring Philosophy, especially at his website. He has a Patreon account, and I really like the video that you did talking about how you want to create a whole library of videos for the arguments of God, for the arguments for the existence of God and defending Christianity. And you kind of talking about how a lot of people don't want to sit down and read like a lengthy article and book. We live in a microwave generation where everything's like really quick. Yeah. And so I think videos are very effective, and especially the way you do them. Like they're great.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So the next question I really wanted to ask is like how did you come to the faith? Like what was your journey? I was listening to you and your conversations with Max Kolbe, and you were talking about how you were an atheist or an agnostic, I believe, at first.
I could never consider myself an atheist. It just never made sense to me. But for a while, I was kind of agnostic. I was more of like a closet agnostic, because if I would have came out and said, I don't believe in God, I would have just been bombarded by people who wanted to talk to me at the church that I was raised in, family members. And I was an introvert, so that's the last thing I wanted. And I also didn't want my cousin to know, because he was going through that college phase, and if he would have found out that he kind of played a role in that, I felt like he would have been kind of like cocky about it. And when you're in high school, you don't want to like give your friends or family members that kind of leg up on you. So I was keeping a little secret. Eventually, though, I mean, I also was kind of mad at Christians. The church I went to, I got beat up there because I'm a scrawny little boy. So I got body slammed one time. I left the church with a concussion one time, and went to the hospital. Yeah, it was fun stuff. So I mean, eventually somebody challenged me to just sit down and read C.S. Lewis, because I was trying to research the stuff online, and I kept coming across Christ-smithers who don't have a clue what they're talking about, and I even knew that when I'm in that phase. And so someone said, you're not getting a lot of good luck reading the arguments against Christianity. Why don't you just try to read some for, and then try to research it from that angle? So I agreed to it, and then I kind of went through back and forth from it for a while. Like, I did not have like a moment where I felt like this over emotional feeling. It was never really that for me. It was just kind of like a logical back and forth. Where eventually I just realized I had to surrender my pride and just go with what the evidence was pointing to. And so I eventually became a Christian on that. And I don't know if there was ever some kind of like call to altar moment. It was more just kind of like, I feel like this, or I feel the evidence is pulling me in this direction. If this is true, this has radical implications, and I need to accept them. So that was kind of how it happened for me.
Right. Cool. Yeah. Just to reiterate what you said, I could never consider myself an atheist. I think for a while I was like you, man. Like it was.
I was skeptical, but I wouldn't say like can't convince myself that there's just no God.
Yeah, I couldn't get myself to say that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the biggest reason for me was just the implications of it regarding with like ethics and purpose, and just like it's like that quote from C.S. Lewis: "If the universe has no meaning, we should never have found out it has no meaning. It should just be completely meaningless to talk about." And I think that was one of the biggest reasons whichever kept me from being a total atheist or even going down that direction.
That's and you brought up something, the word evidence. So like evidence convinced you, because I know in today's society, I mean, militant atheism has totally hijacked the word atheism and skepticism and reason and logic and stuff, to the point where I mean they own that now, right? I mean, and then so the Christian is left therefore without any of that stuff. So I mean, what would you have to say sort of about this militant atheism that is going on, that's sort of bullying the Christians, I guess?
Well, I mean, it's a propaganda campaign. I mean, it's unfortunate, but they're hijacking the word rational or reason, or we are the real critical thinkers, and everyone who doesn't agree with us is just, believes the writings of goat herders. You hear things like this, and it's not. There are very unfortunate. I'd say this was an unfortunate tone. There's very few atheists online that I have a lot of respect for, because you see just the amount of just arrogance and insults coming from them. I mean, it's not so much like, okay, I disagree with you, to have a conversation. It's, you're stupid because you believe in magic sky daddies.
Yeah.
It's like, what? It's like, and I remember this quote from Max Tegmark, who's a physicist, who's not a theist. And he says, it's very important for us physicists not to dismiss ideas just because they're weird.
Yeah.
Because if we did, we would have dismissed all sorts of marvelous things like black holes and atoms.
Yeah.
And so what you kind of get from the atheist community nowadays, not all of them, I mean, there's some intellectual ones that I have respect for, but what we kind of get from a lot of them is that, oh, this is stupid. There's no reason there'd be a God or someone who would rise from the dead or be born of a virgin. This is all ridiculous. It's weird to them, therefore it must be false.
Yeah.
And that's not how it works.
Yeah, and I especially see that on YouTube. Just all the atheist channels on YouTube, they're exactly like, in my experience, like how you described, just very immature. They're, insulting. Like I kind of had that similar experience, especially online or even like atheist users on the internet. Like they're just they're very hateful. They they they're just not charitable at all.
They come in numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so you just talking about atheists that that you respect. I mean, I have some friends who are atheists, and we have like civil conversations, and they kind of see where I'm coming from, and obviously I see where they're coming from. Who would you consider, I guess, as respectful atheists that you've sort of like come into contact with?
Well, I debated an atheist I have a lot of respect for. His name is Corey. We debated on the resurrection earlier this year.
Okay.
He does the Hinge podcast. I have a lot of respect for him. I think he's a great guy, so I mean, I've talked to him. I mean, we're friends on Facebook now, so I mean, I think he's one. Do you mean more like professional atheists or anything
it's
like
whatever, man. Yeah, I guess just atheists that whatever from both sides. I guess people that you've debated and had contact with are also just scholars as well.
I like reading Nicholas Everett. He's a philosopher. Thomas Nagel, I have some respect for as well. Even J.L. Mackie, I was reading him recently because I was planning on doing a video on his moral view of error theory eventually. And I think he's got some pretty good arguments. In fact, I'm probably going to end up using one of his arguments to argue against ethical naturalism.
Okay.
That's the view that there's moral values, but they're reduced to natural properties. So, I mean, there's a lot out there. I'm not saying that it's just this militant new atheist,
right? Yeah,
Richard Dawkins mentality.
Yeah, the four horsemen, so to speak. I know I wanted to really get your opinion on this, but I almost see the four horsemen to me have kind of like faded in the back, and there's kind of like two main ones up in the front, which is Matt Dillahunty and Aaron Raw. Like, what is your opinion on them?
Oh man! Oh.
Because a lot of atheists who I've come in contact with, it's no longer Dawkins or Hitchens or Harris or anything. It's these two guys that are now kind of representing their squad.
Everyone go on YouTube. Go to youtube.com/JohanenRotz. He called in to the Atheist Experience to debate Matt Dillahunty, and Matt Dillahunty basically, in so many words, in one of the call-ins, admitted that Johanan was right. Threw him off the phone and said, "I don't care if a God exists. I just want to know if this is a simulation, how do I get out of it?" So he completely changed the argument from "Does God exist?" to "Is it practical in my life?" Yeah. And so this is, if you watch a couple of the back and forth with Johanan and the Atheist Experience, when they realize they can't refute his arguments, they just change their argument to, "Okay, well, how is this practical in my everyday life? If this being exists, why does it matter for me?" It's like you're this is a sleight of the hand they're pulling there. So there's that. And then Aaron Raw, I thought was really funny. I might be on talking to one of the hosts of the Real Atheology soon on the moral argument. And he said to me in an off comment, because I was...
This is Aaron Raw you're talking about?
Aaron Raw, yeah. Okay. And he just kind of said to me in an off comment, he's like, "Look, I think I made a Facebook post about how I wanted to debate Ted Hovind. And then he got in there and he said, "Look, there are crazies on all sides. I got to distance myself from the crazies on my side, like Aaron Raw." And I was like, "Yes, I like you."
Yeah. Oh man.
I mean, the guy doesn't think Jesus ever existed. It's like, oh my, have you never read the scholarship on this? Like, it's ridiculous.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that's the one thing. And the thing is, I was almost bought in by Zeitgeist, man. When I had a friend of mine at work, and he's like, "Hey man," he knew I was a Christian, so he's like, "Hey man, like, you need to watch this. It's gonna change your whole religion and this and that." And I watched it, and it kind of put a rock in my shoe for a little bit. But it doesn't take that much effort, just to go and be like, "Bro, he lived."
I know, and now people they appeal to like Richard Carrier or Robert Price, but even then, I mean, they have credentials, but you see their exegesis of scripture, it's awful, just horrific,
Oh, I know.
Yeah, it's just like, I just really wanted to get your perspective on Matt Dillahunty and because and this is the one thing that we always say on this podcast when it comes to the opposing worldview, which is atheism, and also too, it's not atheism, but Islam, and it's not strictly atheism, but don't be afraid to go listen to their arguments. And the one thing that I've when I go listen to the Atheist Experience on YouTube, they always pick out that dumb Christian.
Yeah, I know.
Who calls in and they just bully him and rip on him, and I'm just like, I don't agree with that guy either. You know what I mean? Like that guy totally is misrepresenting. And I've listened to Matt Dillahunty, and I love the guy. You know, I wish he would come to faith and stuff. But yeah, I just find some of his argumentation to be, you know, not that good.
And I have a question for you, Mike. Would you ever be interested, like, in doing, I guess, a public debate like that, or are you interested in kind of debating, or for you it's just pure media that you like to?
No, absolutely. I'm perfectly fine doing public debates. I think they're healthy. I think they're great, and I've done a couple in the past. I was doing a bunch on Christian Anarchist page, I think a year ago, just debating. I debated Nephilim free at one point.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess who would you like to debate in the future?
Kent Hovind.
Kent Hovind. Oh man, go ahead.
I'm so sick of this guy being the people that atheists first think of when they think of Christians is Kent Hovind or Ray Comfort or someone like that. And I'm like, can we just acknowledge there are much more rational alternatives than these guys? And so I just want to. I have I've been researching a lot regarding the Imago Dei and how the ancient Near East understood it and how it's understood in the biblical context. And I want to challenge them on that because that's one of their primary arguments for arguing that, you know, the earth has to be young and there's no possible way evolution could ever be reconciled with Christianity is because we were made in the image of God. So I want to try to challenge them on that argument. So I not heard back from Kent Hovind regarding the debate. I had someone who was going to try to set it up for me. So I emailed Ray Comfort to see if maybe he would. So hopefully I'll get something out of that.
Yeah, that's good. Oh, so you know what? I guess since we're on the topic, we could definitely just jump into the whole, you know, I guess creationism, evolution, sort of what Christianity, like how do we reconcile that with Kent Hovind? Because I'll be honest, and I think with you talking to Max Kolbe and y'all's discussions, you mentioned that, well, at least for me, Kent Hovind was the first apologist that I ever encountered, and when I saw him like take on 3 atheists, I was like, whoa, like this guy's owning, and some of his arguments were like pretty good, you know, to me, and I was like, wow, this is cool, and you know, there's a reasonable defense, so to speak, and you kind of had a similar experience, right, with Kent Hovind. I think when you first encountered him.
When I first decided I was definitely a Christian, I was living in Delaware, and someone invited me over. He was like, "You got to watch this debate between Kent Hovind and Michael Shermer." And so I did, and I was like, "Wow, he's got some good arguments. He's really confident. He comes across like very charismatic. So maybe he's onto something." And then I was like, "I'm going to start debating using his arguments." And then my cousin metaphorically hit me over the head with a science book, and I was like, "Okay, maybe I should rethink a lot of this. I don't know what I'm talking about."
Right.
And so, I mean, I kind of started the research. I ended up in Hugh Ross's camp for a little bit.
Okay.
Still kind of like unsure if that was really the case. And then finally, when I started getting into more biblical scholarship, reading early church fathers, reading Philo of Alexandria, I was like, okay, now I'm starting to understand the ancient context. Now I'm starting to get somewhere.
Okay. Yeah. So again, this is for the listeners. Me and Michael Jones wouldn't agree on everything. I think me and Christian probably wouldn't agree on everything, but I think
because, you know, I'll explain my position. Like, to be honest, traditionally I hold to the Younger's creationist view, but, you know, I'm not going to go on the rails and say that anyone who doesn't believe in Younger creationism, like, is not saved or anything like that.
Kent Hovind would say.
Yeah, that's to me.
Well, I don't think they say you're not saved. I think they say you're saying Jesus is a liar. That's something Ray Comfort has directly said of you. Are not a Young Earth creationist. You're saying Jesus is a liar. And I'm like, that's ridiculous.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I definitely would like for you to sort of, I guess if you could talk about the Imago Dei, and honestly, I think I had messaged you like in the past, you know, what I guess I really don't know what sort of position you hold in evolution and how you kind of reconcile the Genesis count and et cetera, you know. So
I can explain it pretty quickly if you want me to.
Well, you could. We got time, so I mean, you could kind of go off on it, man.
I tend to be a full theistic evolutionist. Now, I don't really care if evolution is true. I don't defend it particularly. My main goal is just to show that regardless of what science says, the Bible is compatible with it. And so one of the main ways is that this is done through arguing via the Imago Dei. And people immediately say, well, we can't come from primates because we are made in the image of God and God is not a monkey. Okay, well, what does it mean to be the image of God? And people automatically assume they know what it means without ever actually thinking of it. And not a lot of people have, unfortunately. So I wanted to ask the question, what does it actually mean? It obviously doesn't mean we physically look like God,
Right.
because God is not a physical being. He's the creator of matter. He's not immaterial. So a lot of Christians take the substantive view, which is that our spirits are made in the image of God. To be the image of God means to be a rational being, to understand right and wrong. And that's typically what most Christians think of when they think of the Imago Dei. Well, then they also agree, though, with me that only humans are the image of God. There is no other creature. So cats are not, dogs are not, only humans are. But then I just logically ask, okay, so is Satan the image of God? Because Satan is a rational being. He understands right and wrong. And if to be the image of God means to be rational, understand right and wrong, then Satan must be the image of God. And of course, we would reject that because the Bible only says man was made in the image of God. Angels are not. So the overwhelming majority of Old Testament scholars will tell you the Imago Dei is not a point of creation. It's a point of election, or when we were given a divine function. In other words, it would mean the same thing it means in the New Testament when Paul says we are called to conform to the image of his son. So God at a point elected Adam to be the first priest over creation, to be stewards over creation, enter into a relationship with him, to be his representative on earth. And this is what God does constantly in Scripture. When God wanted to start a family to bless the world, he didn't make one out of nothing. He called Abraham. He elected Abraham. When he wanted to create a nation to represent himself to the other nations, he called Israel to do this. Same thing he does with Christians. So the Imago Dei is just sort of the beginning of that. God first elects humans to be his image bearers on earth, and of course we fail in that, and there was an exile period. That's the same thing that happened with the Jews. Right. They were called to be his representative, and they failed to their exile. Same thing.
Yeah.
So obviously, if the Imago Dei just means an election calling or given a divine function, there obviously had to be a creature already there in existence. And so if you then look at it a little bit more, the only other thing that happens before this is the creation of land animals. Now, I kind of agree with John Walton. This isn't necessarily talking about a material creation, but for the sake of argument, let's just say it is. Okay, the actual word there is asa, for made, or for create, and that's a process creation. The Bible uses that same word to talk about how babies are created in the womb. God asa made you in the womb. It's in the book of Isaiah. So, and it also says, let the earth bring forth the land animals. It doesn't. So that's how God is creating the land animals. So through processes, the earth brought forth the land animals. And then Ecclesiastes 3:18-20 says, I pray that man shall realize he is a beast of the field, for both have the same breath of life. And the word for breath of life is nephesh, which is the Hebrew word for soul. So ontologically, we're the same as animals, according to the Bible. And this is said in multiple places because the same word for spirit is used for man and animals. The same word for flesh is used for man and animals. Same word for soul, the breath of life. It's all used for man and animals. There's never really an ontological distinction made. The only distinction that is ever made is the Imago Dei. So it would just naturally follow that if the Imago Dei is just a special calling, then it's compatible with, regardless of what the material creation of the world and humans is. It's compatible with whatever science would come up with, because it's not talking about our material creation. It's talking about when we are elected by God to be his image bearers on earth.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah, that's interesting. I've never really heard that perspective.
Yeah, neither have I.
yeah. Like I guess that your position fully. So and I guess like when you go ahead and speak, because I believe you're probably going to end up speaking to Kent Hovind or Ray Comfort, when they say, then you make Jesus a liar. Like, how would you respond to that in your framework?
They're talking, of course, about Matthew 19, where Jesus says, "Do you not know that in the beginning he made them male and female?" My first response is, what's the context? Does the word beginning in the Bible always refer to the beginning of creation? Well, no, that'd be ridiculous. If you and I were talking, and let's say I was still in college, and I said, "This school year has been hard, man. I in the beginning I didn't think it'd be this hard." Okay, am I talking about the beginning of creation, or am I talking about the context we're in, the beginning of the school year?
Yeah.
Okay, well, what's the context of Matthew 19? It's marriage. Do you not know that in the beginning God made them male and female? Jesus, they say, what about marriage? And he says, well, in the beginning of marriage, he's talking about the context. He doesn't have to add the words of marriage in there. It's in the context already. He's talking about when marriage was first designed or given to man and woman. So I think, that they're taking it out of context in that regard. Jesus is talking about when God made them male and female. And there's a great quote in the dictionary of the Old Testament about this regards to the word bara and what Jesus is actually quoting, but I can say that for another time.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, you could go, man.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean,
if you want, yeah.
Well, I mean, the dictionary of the Old Testament regarding the word bara says the Hebrew verb bara is not necessarily physical manufacturing as much as assigning roles. This direction is picked up nicely in Genesis 5:2, where God creates people male and female, that is, with established roles. In all of these cases, something is brought into existence functionally, not materially. Rare would the statement concern the issue of matter. Indeed, the text never uses bara in context in which materials are mentioned. Instead of suggesting manufacturing of matter out of nothing, as many have inferred in the past, this suggests manufacture is not the issue. The lexical analysis suggests instead that the essence of the word that the text has chosen, bara, concerns bringing heaven and earth into existence by focusing on operation through organization and assigning roles and functions. And that's Dictionary of the Old Testament, pages 161 to 162. So if Jesus in Matthew 19 is quoting when the Old Testament says he made them male and female, he's talking about the Old Testament context when God assigned the functions of male and female in the context of marriage.
Right. Cool. Yeah, it's an interesting answer, man. A
lot of this doesn't trickle down to the layman level, which is unfortunate. But in the scholarship world, if you read from James Barr to John Walton to Joshua Moritz, it's pretty standard. I come across it all the time.
Right.
Yeah. And I guess I hear one of the biggest objections against theistic evolution is that, would you say that I know you'll probably say that Genesis 1 and 2 is meant to be poetic or metaphorical, but would you also say the same thing about Genesis chapter 3 regarding Adam and Eve and the fall? Like, would you say that's also metaphorical too, or do you believe that Adam and Eve were actual living people, or is it?
Of course.
Oh, okay.
Of course. I mean, my theistic evolution view is that Adam was not the first hominid or human, I guess. He's the first priest of creation. He represents creation to God. He represents all of creation, all of humankind, the same way Jesus does for us now. This is why Paul is always comparing Adam to Jesus. Adam is the priest that fails. Jesus is the priest who succeeded. Yeah. Jesus is our representative before the Father. It makes far more sense with Paul's context if you understand Adam was the first priest for creation, and he failed, and creation thus was separated from God as well. So, and then we're redeemed by the priest Jesus, who succeeded in this. So I think that even fits better with the context. So being a theistic evolution and taking the view I do, I can fully accept that Adam and Eve were literal humans. Yeah. There's no reason to reject that, especially in Paul. He's pretty clear Adam and Eve existed.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was going to ask, is there any part of evolution that you do reject, like neo-Darwinism, for example?
Yes, I reject neo-Darwinism.
Yeah, because if you could explain to our audience why, because I have, on Facebook, I have said like neo-Darwinianism is failing, like it's on its last limbs, it's on its ropes, and I think we could talk about that, and it is like it completely is. I've listened to both creationists and theistic evolutions, and and even theistic evolutionists, and also people of the atheist camp are starting to realize, hey, this ain't working.
Well, it's not so much that it's failing; it's that it's going to change.
Right.
I mean, there is no such thing as a theory of evolution. There are theories, plural, theories of evolution. So there's Darwinian natural selection, Lamarckian evolution, neo-Darwinism, Evo-Devo. Evolution through symbiogenesis and process structuralism, and of course a whole array of other ones. I tend to be more of a process structuralist. Okay. But the reason why neo-Darwinism is going away is it just kind of says that evolution happens through change in gene frequency. So two parents come together and their genes get mixed up, or they passed on to their offspring in different frequencies, and the ones that are better fit for their niches will be passed on. What we're finding out more is that there's just so much more evidence that works for evolution. For example, niche construction would argue that the fact that organisms don't just naturally adapt to environments, they also mold their environment. So think of the beaver. The beaver builds a dam. It doesn't just have to stick in the environment it is, and it can build its own shelter. And the other thing is, of course, epigenetics. Epigenetics, of course, is modifying our view of evolution. And I'm more of a process structuralist, and so neo-Darwinism has a hard time explaining, evidence of convergence. And so I plan to do a video on this in November where I'm going to talk about this. But we see a lot of understanding of evolution that, it kind of has some sort of design, or not so much design, but some sort of something guiding it in some sense. And so I think neo-Darwinism is just an incomplete theory. It doesn't explain enough. It doesn't go far enough, and it just relies on random chance. Yeah. And that doesn't seem to be what the evidence is going for, especially if you read someone like Simon Conway Morris.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Well, that's a good. Yeah, because I've heard from Stephen F. Meyer, who I remember one time he was talking on a podcast about a new group of atheists who are coming out called the Third Way. I'm pretty sure you know about them, but they completely hold, and that was kind of an eye opener to me. Is these guys saying, like neo-Darwinianism, it's not cutting it for us. And I think I heard Max Kolbe too talking about Richard Dawkins just debated one of his colleagues who was a female, and that she was kind of saying the same thing, that neo-Darwinianism is just inadequate. So yeah. Actually, one thing that I definitely wanted to get to. We could go ahead and move on from the evolution topic, but hold on. Let me pull it up here for just a second. So, and I know Michael Jones and I were talking about this on Facebook, but Michael, there was an article that came out by the London Telegraph. All right, and I just got a bone to pick with this article, and it was so easy for me to go, hey, wait a minute, like, that's wrong, you know what I mean? If you would read your Bible, bro, like, you would know, like, that's just so wrong. Like, it didn't even take me a minute to figure out. I was like, well, this is dumb, you know what I mean? So there was a study that came out, and I'll read something from the website, from a website, and pretty much it was a study that came out talking about that they could track, if I'm correct, Michael Jones, that they were able to trace Canaanite DNA with the Lebanese, right? The people that are here today. Correct, right?
Correct.
So out of that study, which was done by the American Journal of Human Genetics, came an article by the London Telegraph titled, "Study Disproves the Bible's Suggestion that the Ancient Canaanites Were Wiped Out." Okay, so that was it. And then from there, I'm not even joking, I have the whole list here. We have the Independent coming out with the article, another one. Bible says Canaanites were wiped out by Israelites by scientists, but scientists just found out their descendants living in Lebanon. The Daily Mail also too put out another article titled Bronze Age DNA Disproves the Bible's Claims that the Canaanites were wiped out. Study says their genes live on in modern day Lebanese people. So Michael, can you tell our listeners why that is just wrong?
Because they didn't read the Bible. If you read Joshua 17:13, it says, "Now when the people of Israel grew strong, they put the Canaanites to forced labor, but did not utterly drive them out." There's case closed.
Yeah.
And it says it in multiple places, like Judges chapter 1 says it too. Oh, the Canaanites are still here, by the way, and they're being put to forced labor. They did not listen to God and drive them out. Okay, so they were not annihilated. There was no genocide.
Yeah. It's pretty simple, man. I was just really mind blown. I was like, wow, and I was seeing this being shared everywhere, and I was like, what? Well,
I think I heard the original science. I think it was originally published in sciencemag.org, and they took it out of their article. They updated it and said, okay, we were wrong. Yeah. So I think that was the original source of it, but they wiped that part clean because they realized that we were wrong about this.
Okay. Well,
So I mean, they actually updated it.
Yeah, because because it says American Journal of, and I have the actual article here, like the study, but I don't know. You could be correct, but from what I understand, it's from the American Journal of Human Genetics.
Maybe I could be wrong. Someone told me that they fixed it, but I mean, this is the same thing you see when people are like saying, well, we have no evidence in Egypt that the Jews built the pyramids. And I'm like, well, yeah, of course you don't, because no one ever claimed that except Hollywood.
It's like something in a Charlton Heston movie or something.
It's like, we have no evidence King Solomon had mines. I'm like, the Bible never says he actually had mines. I mean, you got to read it.
And that's one thing I recommend to Christians and atheists as well. Before you make an argument, especially like this, I mean, read your Bible. And the one thing I saw it, and I have read it, it was all across Reddit. It was all across the atheist forums and stuff. And it was funny that I would go in and refute it and rebut it, and they just did not want to listen. Like, they just did not want to listen to the argument. I'm like, what in the world, man?
Well, there They're too rational to listen to evidence.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. And yeah, I mean, that's just so easily just to blow off to the side already. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I did want to address it in this podcast just because I thought it was funny and it's kind of new. And I actually believe the London Telegraph actually re-edited their article too. So, and they kind of apologized because they were getting a lot of like mail saying what the heck, like this is wrong. And so a lot of Christians were coming up and saying like, are you kidding me? But it kind of goes to show a little bit just kind of the militantness.
Yeah,
I don't know
the
what
culture that we're in. I mean,
I mean, it's just I remember seeing, I think it was on the Atheist Republic a couple days ago, and they asked the question to their followers, if Christianity was proven true, what would you convert? And I said something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
A lot of the comments I read were like, no, of course not. Yeah. I'm like, well, it's like, what?
Yeah, well, then y'all aren't concerned with truth then.
I know, yeah. Their concern is just wiping out like the Christianity. That's all pretty much what their motivation is.
Mm-hmm. I always say they need to be right regardless of what is true.
Yeah.
I guess we can jump into, a topic that I know that you're very interested in, Mike, and I feel like we're all interested too. And this is something that it's very important. Kind of a not so typical argument for God's existence that apologists use, but as far as I know you have a video series dedicated to this, but specifically the case for the soul. And I know you implement like a lot of like studies from quantum mechanics, and you hold to a very specific view that at first when I kind of heard the argument, it was kind of strange to me. Like what we're talking about is idealism. So I kind of like read it up, and to me, like now I'm kind of like understanding it more. Like I kind of like I'm open to the idea, but I just kind of want to see if like that's something that you want to explain. I guess we could talk about the
yeah. We could just go ahead and jump on the case for the soul, his series, and we don't have to go through it all. I highly recommend for our listeners to just go to his YouTube channel and watch him. But if you could kind of explain a little bit of what idealism is.
Sure. I mean, well, in the simplest way, you have physicalism, which would say what you are is just matter. You're just your creation of brain processes, and there's various ways to explain this. Limited materialism, for example, and then there's the other category, which is dualism, which would say that you're two substances. You are a physical and you are a soul. So you're you have two substances there, and then idealism says you're just a soul. And so people are like, what? Like, no, I'm a body. And well, the argument is that the physical is sort of like a material, or sort of like a information construct of that. And the simplest way I can explain it is sort of like David Hume's bundle theory. If you were to describe a physical object, like an apple, you'd be like, okay, well, it's red, it's round. I mean, it's kind of hard. So like you're describing it in terms of mental substances.
Yeah.
You're describing it based on what you see, what you touch, what you feel. You're describing by its properties, and these are of course mental in nature. So the argument is that what we see in the material world would just be sort of like an illusion, not so much. I don't know if I really like that word, but I mean, I get what people think of when they hear it. But sort of like an information construct. And I typically use the analogy of a video game. If you've played an RPG, you are a character in that video game world, and you're seeing this amazing world. You're running around, you're fighting villains and everything, but that world is not real. When you turn and you go into another room, the room you just left from doesn't stay there and like extend it out in space. It's just an information construct that uploads when you go back into the room. Okay. And so the argument is from quantum mechanics and neuroscience that that's a lot how our world would function, is that the room kind of is like, it's the wave function would collapse and the appearance of the physical would be there. But that's not what really it is fundamentally. Fundamentally, it'd just be an information construct. What really is fundamental would be consciousness. What would be fundamental is you, the mind. And the physical is just sort of like an information construct around you. And so I use the analogy of the video game because I think people kind of connect more with that.
Yeah, that's so funny. Whenever you mention the video game, I've used the video game analogy so much on just theology and sort of like reality. So I was like, yes.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is that a lot of physicists, like, you think like this is just some like, kind of crazy talk, like, hey man, like what if we're like, some kind of like computer simulation, kind of like, dumb talk, but like really like, this is something that's becoming mainstream now. Like it's
it's talked about at the World Science Fair. I mean, and it's go back to what Max Tegmark said. It's very important for physicists not to just dismiss ideas just because they're weird. But I mean, we're seeing so much evidence for this, from the holographic principle to elements of neuroscience, quantum mechanics. It's all just kind of coming together.
Yeah. And Mike, now we hear like people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, Elon Musk, who's like open to this idea that we could be like, living in a computer simulation. And I know you feel that's compatible with idealism, and specifically, how does that relate to the existence of God? Like, how would you say that the simulation kind of hypothesis is compatible with like, with theology?
Well, if the material is just reducible to information, okay, well, it's not fundamental in and of itself. The material universe is not fundamental. So it has to be dependent on something. If it's dependent on the fact that of our observations, when we actually observe the world, we collapse actual physical, then we would see the physical is dependent on our consciousness. The problem is that we did not create the video game, in a sense. We did not create the information construct. We are just participating in the reality. So the question is, where did we come from? Well, if consciousness is fundamental, there has to be some sort of necessary consciousness out there that has created the information construct, put us in it, created us. And so it just naturally follows to a necessary consciousness that we would be dependent on and from. And so it just follows right back to theism naturally. Idealism just kind of goes to theism in and of itself. And I think the only other case is solipsism, and I can try to make I make an argument that solipsism reduces to theism anyway. So it's just, idealism is just a natural consequence, or theism is just a natural consequence of idealism.
Yeah. Do you know the apologist Eric Hernandez? He's a substance dualist. So, yeah. And we're friends with him. And, I don't know, because you have Neil deGrasse Tyson kind of coming to this sort of like, oh, it's all a simulation and stuff. And I sort of like, I'm kind of like, bro, how do you reconcile that with materialism and there just not being a God? And I remember Eric Hernandez, when we were speaking with him, there was an atheist who came up to him and says, well, you've convinced me that there's a soul. However, I'm still an atheist. But I think you can't be an atheist and
not be a materialist.
Yeah, and hold to that substance dualist, or believe that there's a soul. I just don't see. I just want to get your thoughts on just my opinion on that.
Well, I mean, it's just they're being inconsistent. It's just a natural consequence of the logical deduction from it. You can say that. I mean, I'm talking to atheists about objective morality, and some of them believe in objective morality, but they don't want to follow the natural logical conclusions to what that means.
Yes.
They just want to say, well, it just is. It just is as it is, and we can't explain it, but it's definitely not God. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, and that's what I feel like, because I feel like a lot of atheistic philosophers, like they are indirectly arguing for God's existence. Specifically, like David Chalmers, when he talks about the hard problem of consciousness, like I feel like that entails the soul, that entails the mind is immaterial. Like, it's just like these crazy kind of same thing with Thomas Nagel, like these. Mental gymnastics that they have to play,
I mean, Thomas Nagel's at least honest. He said in his book, The Last Word, I just don't want there to be a God. Okay, well, at least he's honest.
Yeah, he's honest.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the truth. That's why I did a video on why is atheism a delusion. There's just a lot of studies showing that atheism is just hard for the brain to grasp cognitively. So you kind of have to want it to be true. Otherwise, the brain would not just naturally go there. And in light of all the evidence theists can give, there's just no reason to be an atheist now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
The science that we have dealt with and the conclusions and stuff should leave atheism. I mean, it should lead to the conclusion of people leaving atheism. I was watching a video of Neil deGrasse Tyson. I forgot. I think it was with Larry King Live. But he asked him, like, what happens after you die? And he kind of goes on this like tangent, and he pretty much says, like, we don't know. Like we absolutely don't know what happens. Like, obviously he believes we don't have a soul or anything, and I kind of just jumped to that video and be like, well, that's just kind of a blatant lie.
Just the arrogance, just to absolutely have knowledge of like nothing happens. Like, how can you have access to that kind of knowledge?
Yeah, and especially what we have found. And I kind of wanted to jump into just with kind of that use that as a springboard. In your first video of the case for the soul, you talked about Wilder Penfield. And him coming to the conclusion that the brain does not, the brain does not produce the mind, and you talked about that there was a study that they did, and he couldn't produce the will through the brain. Or how about you explain it? I think you would do a better
basically,
job.
while Penfield was just using electrodes to stimulate parts of the brain, he could make someone's arm move.
Mm-hmm.
So that has implications. Someone could potentially just start controlling you if they could just get control of your brain and make you walk or do certain things you don't want to. But what he found was that he could not stimulate the will. In other words, he could not make me decide to do something.
Mm-hmm.
So he could take over my body and do things to it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously he didn't have futuristic control. He just could stimulate with electrodes, but he couldn't make the person just do it of their own free will.
Yeah.
And so what he concluded was that there's an extra element missing in order to explain this. And we would infer that is what consciousness is. It's not created by the brain. It just simply is correlated to the brain.
Right. Yeah. And I think, and this is something that I wanted to share with you and see kind of what you think. I think the moment that I really started pondering on materialism and the case for the soul is when I started experiencing very severe anxiety and depression, almost to the point where it was suicidal, man. It was really bad. I went through probably about a good year of just horrific anxiety and depression. But it was very weird the way I would feel it. And I just kind of want you to put your 2 cents into this and kind of see how this kind of deals, or how this if this is compatible with idealism. But I was it was weird because I was obviously feeling depressed and stuff, but it was weird because I could feel that these weren't my real emotions. It was kind of weird, and I was kind of sitting kind of in my consciousness and saying, like, this is weird because I don't want to feel like this, but yet I do feel like this. And it was just strange, and somewhere in my conscious, I sort of started saying, something's wrong with my body. Like, something is off. And eventually ended up going to the doctor and ended up finding out how my vitamin D levels were low. I didn't take any medication, but over time through diet and exercise and stuff, I ended up getting better. But I just found it strange because if you are a materialist and your brain produces your mind, then I've sort of would have, wanted to commit suicide. Like I would have followed through with some of my thoughts. You know what I mean? And
right.
I kind of wanted to get your 2 cents on that.
Right. Well, no one denies that the brain or the physical can influence your consciousness. That's just obvious. Right. That's sort of a straw man when materialists bring that up. Like, materialism has to be true, or physicalism has to be true because brain damage, or it's there. And then I'm like, okay, well, no, because the physical, your consciousness can affect the physical world just like the physical world can affect your consciousness. There's an information exchange there, regardless of you're a dualist, idealist, or physicalist. Everyone accepts that. And so, we completely agree that information from the physical world can affect your consciousness because you're actively happening in the world. J.P. Moreland, who's a dualist, uses the analogy of someone driving in a car. If I am the consciousness in the car and somebody just takes one of my tires away, okay, it's going to affect how I'm going to drive. I'm not going to be able to do it properly and properly drive on the streets or in the physical world with everyone else because I have had a physical disadvantage taken away from me. If you could fill the car with smoke and I couldn't see properly, there's plenty of things. So we obviously understand there's an information exchange happening here. So, of course, physical effects like depression will affect your conscious experience and how you're acting in the world. That doesn't mean that consciousness is created by the brain. It means there's an information exchange going on and there's a correlation going on. That's the minimal thing it can mean. Yeah. And that also ignores all the other evidence, which I use in my video series, which points towards more of a fundamental nature of consciousness.
Yeah. And I know you had specifically said, or you mentioned that one video, that there was actually a case where there was a child who was born without a brain that still showed like aspects of consciousness, right?
Right. That was part 4. Yeah, we have cases of people being born with just like a thin layer of brain cells, and then just the rest of the skull is filled with fluid, and they live perfectly normal lives. And it's really weird because
that's crazy.
Exactly, it is but we're stuck in this physicalist paradigm that consciousness has to be created by complex brain processes. It doesn't exist in lower animals because they don't have complex brain processes. But we see it without complex brain processes. We see it happening in these cases of humans. So it completely is throwing a lot of hard evidence against the physicalists and their ideas.
Yeah.
So if you can be conscious without a brain, without complex brain processes, that doesn't follow that the brain or complex brain would create consciousness.
Right.
Yeah, and I also have a question for you, Mike. I personally just want to ask this because, I listen to like a lot of William Lane Craig and a lot of his podcasts, and he mentioned, I don't want to misrepresent him, but in terms of like animal suffering, he feels that, animals don't suffer like, the same kind of pain we do because like they don't have like, the same consciousness that we have. Do you believe that like animals share like the same consciousness, or like animals have a soul, to say, like the same way we do?
Well, if I'm going to be biblically consistent, I would say I have to, because Ecclesiastes 3:18-20 says they do. They say we have the same breath of life. But scientifically speaking, they're not as intelligent as us. They don't have as much neural processing going on. So I would say they're not nearly as intelligent we are. So therefore, they don't fully understand or fully experience what we do in regards to that. I wouldn't say they're not consciousness or they don't have a soul in that sense. I would say because they lack as much brain processing as we do, they're not going to fully feel the same way we would feel in those kinds of situations. And I think that's just being scientifically and biblically consistent.
Yeah. Right. All right, man. We're already hitting up almost about an hour. So I guess we'll just wrap this up pretty quick. So one thing that I wanted to ask too is you have some videos on atheists saying that we are in a delusion. What do you have to say about that?
I would like to know, well, what do they mean? Do they mean that we have a mental disorder? I mean, because there's no evidence of that. I mean, I did a whole video where I went over the studies. There's no evidence that theism functions in the brain like an actual mental disorder or a unnatural delusion would be. Mm-hmm. And so if they see just a general delusion, just we're mistaken about reality, well, I mean, we say they're deluded because they're mistaken about reality. It's just a question of evidence, and we need to debate it. Yeah. So, I mean, I challenge them on that specifically. And this is what I always say to atheists. I put up my arguments for God's existence because I understand I'm making a positive claim for theism. I need to show evidence and arguments. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I have made an inference, and I'm saying this is the best explanation of reality. You can either accept it, be agnostic, or offer a better explanation. Mm-hmm. And typically, they'll just say I'm wrong, but they won't say why. And I'm like, you can't do that. You either have to agree, be agnostic, or provide my series on the resurrection. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I put up a bunch of theories. Look, here's the data. Here are the different ways to try to explain it. Only the resurrection account can explain it. Can you offer a better explanation? And no one has taken that challenge. Not a soul. They want to go off on these tangents about, well, miracles just are very improbable, therefore you're probably wrong. Yeah. And I'm like, that's arguing in a circle.
Yeah, it's a classic Humean argument.
Right. And so if that's what they're going to try, I mean, they're just going to verify theism is the best explanation of the data. If they can't take my challenge, they're just going to agree with me silently that theism is the best explanation of the data, and specifically Christian theism.
Yeah. Oh man, I had a question in my head and I completely forgot it. Anyway, okay, so we'll just jump to this because I definitely wanted to find out what was up with this. Before the podcast, we were talking to Michael, and he was telling us that some atheists had shared your personal information on Facebook page.
Right. Yeah, I mean, somehow they found out my personal page, and so they just posted it on YouTube on a video that responded to me, and I wrote a blog response to it, and they said, here's his personal Facebook page, go say hi to him or something. So it's like, really, this is the level you're going to stoop to? And it kind of says to me is you don't have any good logical arguments, so you're going to try to attack me personally. Mm-hmm. That's really just kind of verifying the arguments are right. Yeah. And so, look, attack me all you want. It's not going to attack my evidence or my arguments.
Yeah. And also, I just wanted to ask, have you actually seen any positive, feedback from atheists? Have you encountered anyone that had their mind changed, regarding, your arguments or your videos?
Absolutely. If you go to my website, inspiringphilosophy.org, and what I do is, instead of like writing out testimonies people give me, I have just taken screenshots of the comments I've gotten. So if you go to the browse section and hit testimonials, you'll see all the comments I've gotten in this big image I've uploaded of all these different atheists or people of different religions who've converted because of the videos I've uploaded. Yeah. So I mean, I see this all the time. Yeah. I mean, so I mean, I have one comment in the top one that says, "You've converted me to Christianity." If I ever write a book that uses the ideas of your videos, that will be the book to end all books. It will convert mass number of atheists. So I mean, I put it up there and say, yes, see, God is at work. So.
Oh, excellent.
Amen.
Amen. And I have to ask, like, what kind of other feature videos are you planning to upload? Like, any certain topics? Like, I know you mentioned that I was reading in one of your comments that you also want to do a video on the Old Testament or regarding the historicity of the Old Testament.
Right. Yeah, I need to go through that. I'm going to probably start going through like evidence for the Exodus, the timeline of the Exodus with Abraham. When I get to that, I mean, the Exodus would have happened in 1446 BC. And there's actually a lot of evidence surrounding the Egyptian kingdom regarding that. Of course, they're not going to come out and say that the slaves won. I mean, because that would look really bad at their record. So you have to look for the clues. And so there's a lot of evidence regarding that. But I think what I have lined up right now is I'm going to finish out my series on metaethics. I'm going to go through a critique of non-cognitivism, moral relativism, error theory, natural moral realism. I'm also going to do two videos on evolution. One will be on the Imago Dei. One will be on process structuralism and just showing how Christianity is compatible with it. Then I might do a critique of Bohmian mechanics, which is an alternative explanation to quantum mechanics. I'm going to probably do a video on the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Judas. I'll probably do a video on, when atheists try to use this God of the gaps arguments. All arguments for theism are just gods of the gaps. I'm like, okay, you're just basically they're just assuming their conclusion. And so I'll do a video on that. And so, I mean, there's still a lot I need to do. I want to do the problem of evil sometime next year, the problem of divine hiddenness, problem of hell. So, I mean, there's so much I got to do. It's just, I don't have a lot of I don't have a lot of time to do it all. But I mean, my eventually goal is I'll go through, I'll start with Genesis 1, then do Genesis 2, then 3, 4, 5, work my way up to the flood, do Tower of Babel, and then do Abraham. Then I'm going to start working my way up through the Old Testament, go through all the difficult passages. And then when I get done with that, I'm going to go through early Christian history, talk about Galileo, the Scopes trial, all these things, like the Crusades and everything. So it's going to be a while. And then sometime in there, I want to talk about other religions like Islam, Mormonism, and whatnot. So that's why I unfortunately have to ask for support, donations on my channel to try to help me get there. Because if I can get enough donations to go full time, I'll be able to do a video a week, and this will go much faster.
Oh yeah, and that's what I want to tell my listeners and the people who listen to this podcast. Go support Inspiring Philosophy at his website. Again, Michael.
And also through his Patreon. Yeah,
his Patreon, and go support him there. I'm definitely going to make a donation as well because. I believe
Thanks so much.
We need to definitely engage against the atheistic worldview and other worldviews, and I think this way, through these videos and engaging through the internet. I mean, it's crazy, man. Like just to know that you could post an article, or you could, and thousands of people see it, or a video and people see it. I don't know if you have millions of views on some of your videos, but I mean, the gospel could be preached to 1 million people through one video. Or a rebuttal to it. And that's amazing to me.
Oh, yeah. And I put these all throughout Facebook and YouTube. So a lot of times I get people who just say, I was just doing a Google search and your videos came up. And that's how I started watching.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's how some of the testimonials I have on my pages happen just from Google searches.
Yeah. Yeah. You also keep me up at night too, man. Like I'll be like, man, I got work in the morning, and like I'm there like at 11 p.m. I'm just kind of scrolling through videos.
Oh yeah, man, I binge watch all your videos.
Yeah,
man.
Just going through them, and I'm like, man, these are so good. It's already 1 a.m.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So again, man, we're really big fans of you, and I know God's doing great things in your ministry, and again for the people to go and support you. The last question and final question, since we're a Christian bookstore, I know you're an avid reader. Can you recommend any books for our listeners and for the people who come in? And also answer too, if you could, how has just reading helped you in your theology and being a Christian?
I mean, it's really strengthened my faith in so many ways, because there's just so much good information out there, and you can learn so much just from opening a book. I mean, if I'm going to recommend anything, read the books by N.T. Wright on his New Testament and People of God, Jesus and the Victory of God, and recently his book, Paul and the Faithfulness of God. It's a 1,500-page book. It took me a couple months to go through, but I learned so much in that book with Paul and what he's talking about. And like, for example, I mean, to just be really short, we don't realize that one of the things the Jews were waiting for was Yahweh's return to Zion. because he left the temple. Ezekiel says he left the temple at the Babylonian exile, and they were still waiting for him to return. And Paul comes on and says, Yahweh has returned to Zion. He is Jesus. So we see this fulfillment of prophecy, and that just jumped out at me. I never even thought about that. Yeah. But that is, Yahweh did return to Zion as Jesus, and now he dwells in the temple. The Holy Spirit dwells in the temple, which is the body. Yeah. So Yahweh did return to the temple. The temple is just the body now.
Right. That's interesting, man. And so any other books?
In regards to what? I mean,
I guess just anything. Apologetics, theology, just...
a good book I would recommend people take a look if they want to understand evolution better would be Life Solutions by Simon Conway Morris. Books I just recently read were by John Walton, The Lost World of Genesis 1, The Lost World of Adam and Eve. Some good books on the New Testament criticism would be Dethroning Jesus, things like that. So there's so many good books out there. I mean, you could read Jesus and the Resurrection of Jesus by Mike Licona if you want to understand the resurrection. Anything by C.S. Lewis is good. Yeah. If you want to understand like a basis of everything, read Philosophical Foundations for a Christian Worldview by J.P. Moreland and William Lane Craig. I mean, I don't agree with everything they say in there, but it's a good book on understanding epistemology, metaphysics, philosophy of science, things like that. So I mean, really depends on the topic.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, dude, I am so glad you came on. I hope you would come back again and join us on just any other discussions and topics. I will tell you that I'm very excited for your video on the Exodus, because I love the Exodus. So
yeah, I'm very looking forward to that one.
Yeah, when you mentioned it, I had so many questions. Like, man, we're running out of time. So maybe next time we could talk about the Exodus and maybe some of the evidence.
I probably won't get to that video within the next year, unfortunately. But if you want to have me back on, we can go through a lot of the evidence for that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, of course.
That would be sweet. So we could set that up sometime in the future. But man, thank you so much. If you could stay on real quick. But
right. Okay, yeah. Go for it.
All right, guys. Well, that's it. Again. Inspiringphilosophy.org. You can find Inspiring Philosophy on YouTube, on Facebook. Go support them on Patreon. We're Bridge Ministries, and you could find us in Laredo, Texas, 1619 McPherson Road. And come by, get a book, go order a coffee, and let's talk theology and stuff. Thank you, Michael. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah, and yeah, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Preach the gospel and fulfill the Great Commission. Love your God with all your body, soul, strength, and mind. And we'll see you on the next podcast. Thank you very much.